a special edition of the BreakbulkONE show. It has come to our attention that there's a serious issue affecting our industry, the plight of the seafarers, and we've gathered a great panel with different perspectives to look at this issue and see how we can provide some relief to seafarers, and also what needs to be done here in the U.S. and globally as well to rectify this situation. So Dennis, I'll start with you. Dennis Mottola, Global Logistics Consultant. Give us an overview of this issue, what's going on now, and why is it so important that we bring our attention to it?
Well, thank you, Leslie. I thought I would start by bringing to light that today, how fortuitous that we chose today to discuss this subject. This is the United Nations International Day of Friendship. And so in that regard, what better friends could we be to those folks that have just a different role in what we do in global commerce, of working the vessels and airplanes for that matter as well. There are crews there, but the discussion today primarily is marine. And the issue that we're talking about is the issue of the mariner or the seafarer that because of COVID-19 and either the policies or regulations that different nations have in place, these folks are having problems being able to get off ships after having served their contractual 3 to 4 month period, or those that have been off ships that have disembarked, getting back onto ships because of various country regulations and policies. So we're here to talk about those issues today, and why they're so important is, first and foremost, this is a humanitarian issue that we should all be interested in. We should all want to engage in this regardless of what we do, what side of the desk that we sit on, what role we have for involvement in international commerce. These are folks that are on the front line doing the work of actually carrying the cargo, operating the vessels. And without them, we're not going to move any cargo. Commerce is going to come to a halt. But above all, this is a humanitarian issue that we're talking about here. These folks are not able to get off ships. Estimated something like 200,000 seafarers are dealing with this issue, and in some cases, these folks have not been able to get off the vessels they're on for over a year in some cases. And the typical contract, as I said, is 3 to 4 months. So first and foremost, it's a humanitarian issue that we all ought to gravitate to. Second, it's a safety concern. As any of us know, in any jobs that we're doing, be it at home or in the office or wherever, when you are physically and mentally fatigued because of your environment or situation that you're dealing with, you are inevitably going to make mistakes, and it becomes a safety concern. These folks do very dangerous work in their jobs, and even those that are operating the vessels, officers of the vessels, they are in the same situation. And last thing we want is an accident either at sea or in port. And so this issue of safety is front and center as well. And then third, I think from a commercial perspective, eventually we are going to see delays in commerce. That also, in my opinion, is inevitable. So this can't go on forever where we've got crews just endlessly or indefinitely not able to get on and off vessels. So this is a real problem. It's something that if we were to walk in their shoes, we would want others stepping up and helping us to be able to do what we can to resolve the issue. So that's why we're talking about it today, Leslie.
Okay, that's great, Dennis. That's helpful. I'd like to now turn to Father Sinclair. who was introduced to me by Dennis. He's had a long track record of involvement in the maritime industry. Very interesting. I read about you that you last year went out on the Golden Bear training ship, which that must have been quite an experience. So you know what it's like to be out there. Tell us about the work that you're doing, and maybe you can shed some additional light on what these seafarers are experiencing right now.
Well, first, just to add to what Dennis was saying, I want to touch upon the fact that for the ratings time on the ship are going to be 7 to 9 months. So if you're an AB or a steward or a cook on board the ship, the officers, they rotate in 4 to 6 months, but the ratings are going to be around 7 to 8 to 9 months. And so now if you start this COVID thing in March, and count 5 months since this thing has really kicked in and ports have shut down, you've got fathers who have been away from their children for literally 15 months at this point. And you can just imagine this, when they come home, the challenge is going to be there for the children and knowing their father and missing that time in which that child would have been growing up during that time. But what we've been working through at the Port Arthur International Seafarer Center is trying to continue to give seafarer welfare to the guys, depending on the situation we're in. We're actually very fortunate here in Port Arthur that CBP and CDC have allowed seafarers, if they are clear and the company allows it, to leave the ship. And that's been a big help, so that in small groups you're able to go shopping or do some things. But that's not universal at all. In fact, we're probably almost like an oxymoron being in Texas, but we're liberal in that area of seafarers' access. Before that, we were doing was being engaged of sort of helping them by doing the things that they couldn't do. So one of our staff would go to the ship. They would prepare a shopping list. We'd go to Walmart, buy the stuff, bring it to the ship. They would reimburse us for it. And so we would do that. We'd also bring hotspots so we had internet access. But this issue of shore leave and crew change is universal. It's very difficult on the international flag fleet, but even our U.S. guys are suffering greatly for that. If you're a member of the Master Mates and Pilots or the American Maritime Office, you're on a feeder ship in Asia, you're going to have a heck of a time getting off that ship to come back to the U.S. I had a friend of mine who was on a ship. He spent 100 days at Anchorage before he could finally come ashore to spend like 2 weeks at a hotel before he could get on the plane and then fly back to the States again. We're seeing that also. There's an article in the issue of Professional Mariner that just came out a few days ago talking about the Military Sea Lift Command. And they have been quarantined on their ships since April or so, and has had no crew changes or anything like that. And so we're seeing this challenge there. Difficulty is that the chain gets broken anywhere in the process. A canceled charter flight, all of a sudden the seafarers are stuck. A country that suddenly says your COVID test has now expired and you can't go any further, stops the process. It's very frustrating because I would argue that this is a classic prejudice against seafarers, because you know how those people are. We don't do this really with airline pilots. In fact, if you go to it before the craziness started, if you were coming into an international airport, there were those for the nationals, those for the visitors, and those for the airline crew. It could rush right through. But seafarers, at least in the U.S., would be taken off to the side, not processed there, because you know how those seafarers are. And that, I think that prejudice is working in the background constantly. So where we would probably fix something for airline pilots or others, that seafarers constantly are stumbling in these situations. Finally, I would say, I think there's been a terrible failure upon governments that are labor supplying countries, because they don't show a lot of interest in really getting their citizens back. They're still collecting the allotments, They're still getting the money from the guys on the ships, but they don't seem to be very angry like they should be of their seafarers being forced to work over here and not being able to return home to their family.
Okay, that points out some more very difficult facets to this problem. I'd like to now turn to Thomas Damsgaard, who's had a huge amount of experience in a number of different maritime sectors. Thomas, what do you think about this?
Well, first and foremost, thank you very much for letting me contribute to this very, very, very important dialogue. Again, maritime is one of the pillars of the global economy and making sure that it continues to run through this pandemic. Again, close to 90% of the world's cargo is moving by the ocean. So again, we fill a lot within the supply chain. Well, supply chains have failed. And we have seen that through this pandemic. You know, our high efficiency with very short inventories, almost down to like a week at a time, you know, because you've been dependent on having weekly sailings to resupply, has fallen apart. As carriers out there have blanket sailings and they're bumping cargoes and delays happen to cargo. So there's what I see, and a little bit of the frustration with this here is that we are so dependent on maritime and transportation. We welcome the ships into the ports with open arms. We are dependent on the cargoes, but let alone we are treating the seafarers that are making this happen and that are going out of their way, that have been on board ships for over 12 months. We are treating them as third-class citizens. And ship's crew is essential workers. If this here stopped overnight, our whole society would shut down way beyond what it has been with the pandemic. So there needs to be a realization of that. I would say also that early on, for non-seafarers, I saw quite a few mercy flights, countries doing mercy flights to evacuate their citizens back home. I came back myself from Europe, from Spain, which was a hotspot mid-March. Half the plane was full of college students being brought back to the US as well too. So we are treating a lot of our citizens in this kind of supportive manner. However, countries seem to have forgotten the seafarer citizens in this sense. And I think that it is upon them to really engage a lot more, looking at things like these mercy flights, maybe even go beyond the crewing agencies arranging it, to make sure that they can evacuate some of their citizens back, and also sending new citizens back out that can recrew the ship so we can keep these supply chains and this maritime going. What Father Sinclair is saying about the airline industry is something that I've given a lot of thought to. I've just come back from Europe. I was there for 3 weeks. I came back about 10 days ago, and I saw how the airports are working now, how routing is being done. You try to connect in your country of origin, where you have already kind of been approved to travel, versus trying to do it at a remote country. There's protocols in place for the airline industry already. And what I don't understand is why we have not taken a page from their playbook for our maritime seafarers. The airline industry is struggling tremendously with, there's not enough demand. So again, starting to move seafarers around on these flights, and maybe in some cases doing dedicated flights as well, would also support the airline industry. But I feel that it's another story of maritime that is repeating itself, where we are trying to not collaborate across our supply chain, across our vendors, but what we are trying to solve it ourselves. And there's just no connectivity across the platform. IMO has failed miserably. It's all bark and no bite at all from the IMO, which should have stepped up to the plate here. So yeah, this is where I'm seeing it, unfortunately.
Okay, all right, Thomas. Reiner, as in your role in a global freight forwarder, how is this situation affecting you? Number one, how do you see its impact on the industry? And then I'd like you to talk a little bit about your fundraising effort with Schroeder Marine. Clearly, this is an important topic to you, and you've already jumped in with some relief. So if you could cover all of that, that would be great.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me. This is a thing that has been close to my heart for 15 years or so. I've volunteered here at the Seafarers Center. That's where I'm actually at right now. We had a meeting here today, and I figured it would be a fun place to stay for this meeting. And the only one in here, sadly, they had only 8 seafarers in this center here in July, coming through the facility using the services. Usually they have about 300 coming in, right? So, and that's where we got together with Jürgen Schroeder a while ago and said, you know what, we want to help the guys here in our home port and come up with a concept and donate some money. And together with the Seafair Center and Dana Bloom, we decided to help the ships here at the Turning Basin. That's just the start. We encourage others to help us. We just went out to the media. It's posted on LinkedIn, etc. But the idea is to reach out to the captains, ask them basically what the needs are of the crew a week or so ahead of time while they're still out at sea, and then go and purchase the things and and also visit the crews, go onto the ships and speak with them and have a dialogue. I think they haven't seen a living soul other than their crewmates for a year, so they would love to have some engagement with other normal people. And so we will do that starting Monday with a ship coming in here. And yeah, so it's just trying to give forward. And at the end of the day, it's not about talking about it, it's about be about it, right? To do something, and that's our motto. And we already have $30,000 raised within a couple of days, so hopefully there's more. And hopefully, as I said, there are other ports around the world. They say, you know what, we can make a small difference. It's not going to help these guys to get home, etc., but it helps them to maybe have a chance to speak to their family more often if you give them phone cards, etc. So it's just a smaller difference to start with. From a business point of view, a lot of blank sailings, right, for several reasons, right? And but crew issues is certainly a part of that, part of those decisions that the carriers have blank sailings, and that means the cargo is not flowing, and our customers are obviously battling with getting their freight from A to B, and we have a more difficult time to find the space, manage the bookings, etc. So our usual file, ocean export file, takes about two hours to complete from A to Z. Right now, we almost need double that time, right? So that's our efficiency is down, way down, because it takes a lot more time for us to complete a booking. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, I agree with what everyone else is saying here. We have to do something about it, and I think we need to include the governments. Here in Houston, I found out you need a shore pass to get off the ship, but you only get the shore pass if you have a visa. Some of the carriers, they don't spend the money for the visas for their seafarers, so they're not allowed to leave, and that's wrong. Maybe the governments can make exceptions and say, hey, look, all seafarers are exempted by visa. They are not leaving the port facilities anyway. For the most part, they might go shopping, but then they can be escorted by somebody that has a TWIC card or whatever. But there must be easier ways for them to get off the ships.
Okay, good. And now I'd like to open it up to all four of you to see if we can't come up with some actions that our viewers might take. What influence, what actions can people take today that would help get this moving in the right direction? Who wants to jump in first?
I'll start, Leslie.
Thanks.
And these are just some ideas. I don't know that this is one of the problems is it doesn't seem like there's any international coordination on this to do something. And I would agree with Thomas in that the IMO seems like the logical organization and its member countries to come together as one body to try to address this, and it still boils down, I believe, to countries, though, changing their policies, changing their the regulations that they've put in place that make some of these restrictions difficult. Hong Kong's a good example of what Hong Kong just did recently to kind of reverse the policy they had previously, whereby if you're not picking up or delivering cargo there, if you're just bunkering there, you can't get off the ship. Even, you know, to see a chaplain, if you want to see the port chaplain, you can't do it. So I think our influence has to be with our own regulators in this country, with our own port state control. What I've read is that in some cases the port state control folks, in our case, that's the U.S. Coast Guard, even from port to port may apply the rules differently, which is a whole nother level of frustration to deal with regard to what happens in Houston versus maybe what happens in Beaumont or what happens in New Orleans. So those are a couple of folks. And then I think as charterers, you know, those that are in the industry booking cargo or booking a vessel, putting a charter party in place, whether you're in either of those two seats, ask the owner, the operator, the carrier, what are you doing on behalf of the seafarers that are manning the ships that you are putting into place, or you're carrying my cargo if I'm a shipper booking cargo? Mr. Carrier, what are you doing to help the plight of the seafarer? What is your company doing as operator of a vessel to help these folks and to address the problem either at the national level or with port state controls? So those are just some ideas. I don't, maybe Father has some given some thought. He's been in this a little bit longer than I have. I'm recent to jump on board of this cause, but you know, those are things that I know that we can do, and certainly those folks that have control of cargo. If there's no cargo moving, you know, the carriers are going to be, you know, we're going to get their attention. So if the folks that are in control of cargo care about this, want to do something about it, something will happen, in my opinion.
And I'll just add to what Dennis was saying, that weeks ago, the International Transport Workers Federation sort of got a gutful of this whole process, and they called for basically stop shipping, just stop moving the ships. And I can tell you, if all the ships around the world stopped moving, everything would come to a screeching halt. I'm a member of the United States Merchant Marine. I have my AB ticket, and I can tell you that if we stop shipping petroleum products from Western Gulf to Florida on Jones Act work, that nobody's going to Disney World, nobody's going on a cruise regularly, and nobody's flying either, because all that stuff comes and it's dependent upon those guys. But we forget about that. It's actually sort of a frustrating replay of post 9/11, because you had a lot of facilities at that time decided to deal with their problem with seafarers by saying security and keeping seafarers on board, and then just couldn't get anything sorted out. It's taken us 19 years to finally get seafarer access to shore leave guaranteed in U.S. law. 19 years to do that. And this has a lot of parallels between that and now. What a word that's been coming around is sea blindness. I've seen this phrase pop up occasionally, and I see it in Port Arthur. You can see it in Houston, in any port city, where people live in a port town, and then one day they wake up and they sort of say, well, what's that big ship doing here? Because they don't realize that they're in a port town. I've complained growing up in Port Arthur that most of the folks act like they're living in Colorado. but there's no waterfront activity that is there. So if we can work on curing the sea blindness, we'll go a long way. There's been some efforts. On July 12th, we had Sea Sunday, and both the Missions to Seafarers, Sailor Society, as well as the Apostleship of the Sea. So that goes sort of like the Anglicans, Episcopalians, the mainline Protestants, and the Catholics observe Sea Sunday. Cardinal Turkson of the Dicastery for the Promoting of Integral Human Development at the Holy See issued a special statement, and a central part of that statement was the whole issue of crew change and trying to move this thing forward. But it's a small group, and until we can really begin to push outward and get more and more people engaged in it, we will continue to practice the sea blindness, where we possibly will see the ships, but we will never even comprehend that on those ships are 23 to 26 human beings.
Okay. All right. Thomas, what are your thoughts?
So I think there's a couple of different aspects to this here. Some is like what Rainer is referring to, you know, kind of controlling and taking care of the seafarers locally here. I don't have a lot of faith in government right now. I don't think that they have served us well in many other areas, and I don't expect them they're going to do that for our seafarers either. We are about to hit a second, in certain areas of the world, a third phase. And we are seeing countries in the Middle East that a couple of weeks ago allowed crew changes, and now they are not allowing it anymore. I think we're going to see more of that. So I don't think repatriation of crew members and crew exchange is going to flow freely and efficiently going forward. So then it becomes to what can we do for the crew on board while they are still working these extended hours, making sure that they keep their mental health. And, you know, initiatives that Rainer and his team is doing, you know, I think is very admirable. And you know, we need to make sure that word gets spread out to the ports. But I think there's also an aspect to it that oftentimes we forget, and that's the families back home, right? And I think the crew agencies here, and the owners, they should actually be held to a higher standard, making sure that the crew members' families are being taken care of as well too. I have been back in the day when we dealt with a lot of piracy in the Gulf of Aden. I was involved in one case down there of a ship taken, and there was one of our first priority was actually that the crew members' family, whether they were in Russia for the officers or they were in the Philippines for the able crewmen, that they were taken care of, and they received the support that they needed to make it through this very stressful situation. The crisis we are going through now is being referred to as a war situation. So let's think about that. You know, what would we do in a war situation? What have we done to ships that have gone into the Arabian Gulf during war, you know, with war risk premiums and war bonuses and what have you? I don't think you can buy yourself out of this here. I don't think giving a bonus to the crew necessarily is gonna alleviate the situation that they're in. But I think if we are calling this a war situation, I think there will be more tools in our toolbox to more efficiently handle it and manage it.
Okay. Rainer.
Yeah, I wonderful input from everyone, and I want to go back to what Dennis said. I think we need to challenge the ship owners. I heard some of them don't want to spend the money on the visas for these poor guys, right? And that's wrong. And then, you know, also, yeah, I agree. If we control cargo, we can pressure them a little more. We can ask those questions. We can include some language into a booking note or whatever. Just, hey, what are you doing with your seafarer safety, et cetera, et cetera. You know, who knows? Maybe they want to implement a surcharge. They're implementing surcharges for everything, but you know, maybe there's a $50 a ton you pay extra on making sure that these crews are taken care of, and the families. But you know, I guess again we got to push back, and with our little effort, we are reaching out to every carrier we're doing business with, container carriers, breakbulk carriers, you name it. So we are really approaching them. We are challenging them, and hopefully there will be a bit more positive feedback from the ship owners.
Perfect. All right. Well, we have heard a lot of great ideas, what needs to be done. Certainly not a simple task ahead, but I think we have a much clearer picture now than we did when we started. So that is great. I want to also say that Breakbulk Magazine will be following up on this session to do a feature story in the next issue that will come out 1st of September. So just be on call for perhaps another interview. And I want to thank all 4 of you so much for joining us today on the BreakbulkONE show. And I hope that we can make a difference. We will put up the information for the Seafarers Fund at the end, and I hope everyone will participate and think about what they can do to improve the situation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Leslie.
Thank you, Leslie.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Dennis, Thomas, ciao.
Ciao.
Bye, Leslie.
Sarah.
Bye.
Bye.